Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. Why are we doing this podcast? Is it for good? Are these the powers of evil who have us transmitting these devices? I do not know, but it is exhausting.
Thank you, Jason. Jason's going to bring all of his energy to this film that he's so enthused to talk about.
And how could you not be? Speaking of energy, that's really the key word to describe this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not upbeat.
I will do talking for an hour and a half, and you will do talking for an hour and a half, but only if it is the same conversation for the same hour and a half.
Yes, it is. I hope that we can bring more energy to the podcast, maybe than the characters bring to this film. And what is this film? Well, in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we've been talking about the films of 1987. And we're here at our Cannes Film Festival episode, which often finds us talking about slow European art films that don't appeal to Jason. And that is what we've got here. The Palme d'Or winner from Cannes. It is Under the Sun of Satan, from French filmmaker Maurice Pialat, starring Gerard Depardieu, who we've discussed before, actually, and Sandrine Bonnaire, both of whom were longtime collaborators with Maurice Pialat. It is based on the novel by Georges Bernanos, a famous French writer, and the novel from 1926. And yeah, it's slow. It's a slow, contemplative drama about a priest played by Gerard Depardieu who's having a crisis of faith of some kind. He's tempted by Satan. He's trying to help a young lady who is a bit out of control, played by Sandrine Bonnaire. And there's a lot of talk about theological concepts in this film.
I think we could take the rest of the show off, Josh. You just did the whole show for us.
I hope you have something to say about this movie, Jason. I can't do it all on my own.
Georges Bernanos, as you said, this is based on his 1926 novel. The third time a Bernanos book was adapted to film. The two previous adaptations, Diary of a Country Priest and Mouchette, were both directed by Robert Bresson. How did you like that, Josh?
Good job. Yeah. And Bresson, another very, very austere French filmmaker. And I've only seen, I think, one other Bresson film, and not one of those that's a Bernanos adaptation. But this definitely put me in mind of Bresson as well. I mean, it's a certain kind of style that doesn't work for everyone.
So this was the first French film to win the Palme d'Or in 21 years, 1966, A Man and a Woman by Claude Lelouch. And when this won, a lot of people booed and hissed because they thought Wings of Desire, the Wim Wenders movie, was going to win. And Pialat said, "If you don't like me, I don't like you either."
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy the sort of contentiousness of Cannes. And of course, Wings of Desire has gone on to be a beloved classic, and this not so much, although plenty of people do love this movie. And Pialat himself is a major French filmmaker, so it's not like this is just a piece of garbage that everyone hates. But certainly, Wings of Desire is way up there in terms of acclaim and people's interest.
And maybe we'll get to it as a bonus episode. And instead of talking like this, Josh, I can talk like this.
Well, I sure do look forward to that.
Yeah, not my best work. I agree. Sprachen Sie film history?
You think this movie is slow and dreamy? Wait till you watch Wings of Desire, man. I was not a fan of either of those films, honestly. They could really both win the Palme d'Or.
I mean, I would like to know what you would have voted for on the 87 jury. Had you been a jury member at Cannes in 1987 as a 7-year-old child, what would have been your pick?
Yeah, I don't know. Other than Wings of Desire, because as you said, people wanted that to win. I don't recall what else was on the docket that year. I didn't look it up in terms of competition, and if it's anything else that I've actually seen. Certainly nothing else that I saw when I was 7 years old.
Well, the jury president was Yves Montand, so he's a Frenchie. So
He
uh,
sure is.
Jerzy Skolominski Skolomowski, sorry, was on the jury, and we know a lot of his movies are not the happiest either.
True.
Norman Mailer on the jury.
A lot of big names there on the jury who liked this film. So maybe we should give them the benefit of the doubt and attempt to engage with this film.
I watched it, and I will not give them the benefit of the doubt, Josh. So,
okay. I too watched it. That was really excellent start to the podcast.
So you got Barfly by Barbet Schroeder. You have Aria with our friends Robert Altman and Bruce Beresford. You got a Paul Newman movie, The Glass Menagerie, which, obviously they wrote a play about it after the movie.
That's definitely how that went.
Yeah. And then Stephen Frear's Prick Up Your Ears. Those are kind of, just looking at it quickly, the ones that I recognize from the in-feature competitions.
Well, this was fascinating. I haven't seen any of those films, so I cannot answer your question.
I mean, Josh, you've had since the age of 7 to watch these. What have you been doing with your life?
I'm sorry. I was busy watching Nightmare on Elm Street movies or something, probably. So I didn't get to those. But someday, perhaps I will. I did see Wings of Desire.
Peter Greenaway had a movie. So I feel like all of these guys are just like, a lot of these are just like, they seem like really downtrodden films.
Yeah, well, Cannes picks often difficult dramas in competition there. But those are major filmmakers. So it makes sense that they'd be here. And again, Pialat himself was also a major filmmaker. Even if this movie in particular wasn't necessarily everyone's favorite, he had been a major filmmaker in France since sort of the later French New Wave era. So it makes sense that he'd be in competition at Cannes and that he would have a chance to win the Palme d'Or.
I'm in Cannes, but screw you.
And I appreciate that attitude, right? I mean, that's part of what's enjoyable about Cannes is that the audience will boo and the filmmaker says, I don't like you. And it's great. It's passion for film.
Or it will get a 20-minute standing ovation for Clerks 3 or something like that.
That too.
Talk about a downtrodden film.
That is. I'm glad we're not talking about Clerks 3. This movie also played at the Toronto International Film Festival and the New York Film Festival. And despite that divisive response at Cannes, it was also nominated for 7 César Awards, which is the French sort of equivalent of the Oscar, including Best Film, Best Director, Best Actor for Gerard Depardieu, Best Actress for Sandrine Bonnaire, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, and Best Poster, which is not a category we have at the Oscars, but maybe we should.
Or maybe even at the technical Oscars, we can show, the montage of all the winners of the ones they won't show on TV, and Best Poster could be part of that.
Yeah, I'm all for that. Anyway, it won none of those awards, but it did get all the nominations. It was also named the best film of 1987 by Jason's favorite publication, Cahiers du Cinéma.
That is when I had to resign over my differences with them on this pick.
Yeah, fair enough. It grossed apparently $68,765 in the United States, which is not a lot of money, but really the fact that it grossed any amount of money in the United States is kind of impressive for a movie like this in 1987. I couldn't find any.
Gonna disagree with you. It was, Cannes winner. I feel like that's an automatic built-in audience of cinephiles who are going to go like, I got to go see it. It won Cannes. It's going to be great.
I suppose that's true. So that's where every one of those dollars came from, was from people like that.
Yeah, it's my American accent now, Josh.
Somehow you're not even good at doing an American accent.
All the Americans who go to see the Cannes winners are just like crusty old New York cab drivers in my mind. Hey, I don't want to go work this shift. Give me a donut and I'm going to go watch this French movie.
That's perfect. There is a figure, however, apparently 815,748 admissions or tickets sold in France. I don't know how that translates financially, but maybe it was a successful film. Who's to say?
I mean, it is a successful film. We're talking about it all these years later on Awesome Movie Year, the number 37 podcast in all of my queue for listening to.
Yeah, I think you're really rating us highly there.
At least I listen to them. You don't even listen, Josh.
Sometimes I do. I listen while we're doing it, right? I'm listening now. I'm listening to what you have to say.
Okay, Josh. This type of lack of introspection is why you're never on the Cannes jury.
Someday I'll get there. Maybe when they start adding 7-year-olds to the jury.
You've been on film festival juries though, right? Like 48-hour film project or something like that?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know about that. I think I was on the jury for our friend Chad Clinton Freeman's Polygrind Film Festival one year, if you can call that a jury. Yeah, I've judged submissions, I think, or whatever in film festivals before. But Chad, God love him, but Polygrind is no Cannes.
But this should play at something like Polygrind. You know, you got all these like horror movies and splatter movies. This I found quite horrific.
Yeah, I mean, it has some horror elements to it that we'll probably talk about. So, Jason, you're not actually, both of us, we're not in bad company here, really, with critics who, from what I found, were not necessarily that into it. But Janet Maslin in the New York Times did like the movie. She said, Maurice Pialat directs in an ordinary-looking style, yet he approaches filmmaking in an extremely unconventional way. That paradox is more apparent than ever in Under the Sun of Satan, the film that won this year's top prize at the Cannes Film Festival and was roundly booed for doing so. When Mr. Pialat approaches more psychological subjects, his deceptively straightforward manner and his ability to suspend judgment can have the look of naturalism, though his scrutiny is so keen that it becomes extraordinarily penetrating over a period of time. But Under the Sun of Satan is about faith, and it's a more difficult, mysterious film in every way. Even so, Mr. Pialat has employed as plain a directorial style as ever. So the miraculous, the visionary, and the diabolical fuse here in a film that grapples simply and powerfully with the unknown.
You know, when I was watching this, I thought back to our Enigma of Caspar Hauser episode, right? And again, we're talking, the European countrysides, a lot of talking as opposed to a lot of action. And I just felt that, like, looking at something like, and it's another downtrodden movie can be difficult to watch, but I thought that had so much more dynamic elements to it than this one did. So Maslin and I, you say I agree with the critics, Josh, but not Maslin. Not Maslin.
Not Maslin, but we'll get to it, believe me. But yeah, I agree with you, though. I thought of Caspar Hauser as well, and I think that movie is so much more engaging. There's so much more liveliness to it. I mean, as we saw in your excellent impression, Bruno S. gives this sort of live wire performance, whereas Gerard Depardieu here is so subdued. I mean, and I'm sure this is on purpose. I'm sure that's what Pialat wants, but he's so like colorless in his performance that it drains the life out of you as you're watching the movie.
I think you could say that for everyone in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, Sandrine Bonnaire, that character, she kind of wails and thrashes around a lot. She has a bit more energy to her, but it gets kind of tiresome, I think.
They're not really layered, I would say, right? Yeah, I agree with you. Tiresome is a good word for it. And this is not to, like bash these actors. We know they're two of the most, especially Depardieu is one of the highest grossing film actors in French history, one of the most awarded, and Bonnaire has had a storied career. This one just doesn't work for us.
Yeah. And I did watch another Pialat film with Gerard Depardieu from 1980 called Lulu. That's kind of more what she's describing. It's a contemporary story, and it's also kind of austere, but the characters have much more vibrant emotional lives. And I wasn't really crazy about that film, but I could engage with it more because I could feel like I understood the characters more, I think.
We appreciate your service, Josh.
Thank you. So here's someone you can agree with. Hal Hinson in the Washington Post said, here's your choice. You can spend however many dollars it takes to see Maurice Pialat's Under the Sun of Satan. Or you can stay at home and hit yourself over the head with a hammer. The pain caused by Under the Sun of Satan, which, by the way, stars Gerard Depardieu as a tortured Catholic priest and Sandrine Bonnaire as basically a nutcase, is less extreme, but gnawing and prolonged at a low-grade level through interminable scene after scene in which actors run through page after page of dialogue, all about characters you have no previous knowledge of or events that are equally obscure.
He hit the nail on the head, if you will,
With his
with his
hammer.
words, with his word hammers, right? So, but just to say something, these kind of walking and talking movies, I love a lot of them. The Before series we talked about. I mean, we covered Smiley Face, which wasn't my favorite, but that's kind of one of them. I'm all for these type of movies. Rye Lane this year was a good one, but obviously different genre, right?
Yeah,
But
those are all kind of romance or comedy. None of that going on in this
I'm
film.
just saying, like, okay, well, so Dave gave a great example on his Letterboxd, which you can find at Go for Jason. But Dave compared it to First Reform, the Paul Schrader movie. And that was, I think, for all of us, one of the best movies of the year it came out, like a top 5 probably for us. Or it's just an amazing movie. And that, again, is another one similar in theme and a little more action, but not much. But I think there's this one it just falls so flat from scene 1 on.
Yeah, I mean, I think First Reformed is a great example, comparison, and I am sure that Paul Schrader is influenced by Pialat in general and by this film. I thought of First Reformed and other recent Paul Schrader movies. I mean, The Card Counter has a lot of similar elements to it as well. These kind of tortured, the man in a room movies, as Schrader calls them, about these tortured guys. And I agree. I loved First Reformed. I didn't really care for The Card Counter, but I think Schrader has a more dynamic style going on and more character insight here. And I mean, I wonder if part of it is because it's based on this novel that is probably essentially just like an allegory and maybe isn't even concerned with whether the characters feel like real people. And maybe that's difficult to translate to a film.
I mean, Hinson in that review is talking about the length of the scenes. And to me, it was less about if the scenes were overly long and more how overly wrought they were. It just felt like we had the same conversation in the last scene and the last scene and the last scene. And it just felt like one boring, depressing straight line all the way through. Spoiler alert, I didn't like the movie.
Yeah. So not as much as Hal Hinson, who, by the way, spends almost all of his review describing how to go buy a hammer that I left out.
How do you do that, Josh? According to Hal Hinson.
He tells you the price of it and what kind of store you should go to. And
that's pretty good. That's pretty exciting. Josh, you and I are writers in print, which still exists in some cases. And I've definitely done some reviews where like I just didn't engage with whatever I was reviewing and I had to come up with a creative way to do it. And those are fun risks to take, and sometimes they pay off.
Yeah, sometimes they do. But I tried to stick to his comments on the actual movie. So Hilary Mantel in The Spectator in the UK was not a fan, but she engaged a little more directly with the film. She said, "At the core of this enigmatic film is the priest's question to Mouchette. Why did sin seem worth the trouble to you? The devil is just a man you may meet on the road. His lures are routine ones. Every sinful action has been performed before you by someone else. You cannot therefore distinguish yourself through evil, much less free yourself. Too much of this is conveyed to us through limp aphorisms, which sound little better in French. The film is absorbing, and Depardieu is as good as ever, but if we are to be presented with such a generous account of the inner life, we do need an exterior context that is better defined. There are a few terrifying moments and a few silly ones, but throughout there is an air of something being kept back, something about these people's motivations that we ought to know, rather as if the story had been started in the middle."
Right, what's all this then?
Man, so many great accents in this episode.
Just going for it. She's got a little Cockney.
She's a Bobby. She's a London Bobby who was hired to
little Cockney. Maybe Henry Higgins could work on her enunciations with her.
Good.
I agree. I mean, we come in and the first thing we hear is like Gerard Depardieu, I am so tortured. I have so much turmoil in my mind, right? And it's like, that's kind of where it opens and you're like trying to play catch up with it. And then you catch up very quickly and then you're way ahead of the movie for the rest of the time.
Yeah, it is very disjointed. And I mean, it's interesting to me that it got nominated for that César Award for Best Editing, because to me, I thought the editing was so confusing, and maybe that's deliberate. But like the first time it cuts from Gerard Depardieu in the church, kind of giving communion, the communion wafers, and then all of a sudden, like extremely abruptly, we see Mouchette, Sandrine Bonnaire, kind of like walking into frame, and it almost looks like she's in the church, but then you realize we're somewhere else. And then for the next like 20 minutes, we're just hanging out with her and her lovers. And it's like, who are these people? And how did we get here? And how much time has passed? And then suddenly, boom, we're back in the church with Gerard Depardieu. And it was very jarring.
I got a similar impression. Here's another spoiler. After Mouchette kills herself, and I'm like, wait, are they in her house? Are they in her apartment? Now we're in the church. Like there wasn't clear delineation of the sets. And that's not just an editing problem. That's a problem with the direction.
Right. And I mean, I do think it's possible that is deliberate to kind of keep you off guard or whatever, but it does make it hard to follow and make it feel like you're missing something that's important.
You know what I missed? Joy.
Well,
because I didn't have joy watching this film, Josh.
We'll get some joy later on, I'm sure, in future episodes. Anything else you want to say about the background of this film, Jason?
The background of this film, as you mentioned, Josh, you watched Lulu, which you did not think was quite a Lulu, but those are two of the four films that Depardieu did with Pialat. So
yeah, that features Depardieu as well as Isabelle Huppert, who we've talked about a couple times. It was a 1980 film, so around the same time she made Heaven's Gate, which of course we devoted an episode to. And again, yeah, that's a contemporary story. It's set in Paris in the present day. It's about this kind of self-destructive romance, and it has a lot more energy to it, even though I found it sort of tedious. And he is Pialat, although I don't think that comes across really in this film, but certainly in Lulu, he's compared often to John Cassavetes, who we've also talked about, right, and who I didn't particularly care for. And Lulu definitely feels very Cassavetes-esque. So I assume, Jason, you had not seen other Pialat films.
No, Josh, and I don't plan on it anytime soon. Not to say I wouldn't watch any other ones, but I did not like... there's nothing that engaged me to the point where I was like, I got to dig deeper on this guy.
Right. And Dave, you as well? We're not
yes.
a Pialat expert?
Same over here. Nope. Don't know anything about him. And I don't know, maybe I'd be interested in seeing more, but I'm not rushing out. Let's say that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll rush back and get to more of our general thoughts on Under the Son of Satan. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1987, we are talking about the Cannes Film Festival Palme d'Or winner, Under the Son of Satan, from filmmaker Maurice Pialat, which we didn't care for, it seems like. So, Jason, you've been quite negative, and I don't disagree with you, but is there anything that you did like about this film?
The French countryside looks lovely, Josh. I think I would like to go on a tour and eat some wine, drink some cheese, and just have a nice time exploring. Maybe go truffle hunting, find a pig that can lead me through there, and just really get in touch with historical French countryside nature. Like nature, Josh. I like nature. Good food.
Mm-hmm. Maybe meet Satan along the way.
Did you, as you were watching this, when those two met, did you recognize that to be Satan, or did you just think it was a dude trying to give him the old onesie twosie?
Jason's euphemism there or something. No, not at first, and I don't think you're necessarily meant to realize it at first. Yeah, at first he just seems like a kind of a weird guy along the road, and then definitely at a certain point I was like, oh, he's sort of propositioning the priest, it seems like. And then he says, oh, we can go rest in my hut. And I definitely thought at that point, oh yeah, he's gonna put the moves on him. And he does. He kind of kisses him on the mouth as the priest is lying down and is exhausted. And that's kind of where I thought that was going. But then he's like, hey, I'm Satan. And then I knew he was Satan because he said he was.
You didn't think he was just trying to Be like, hey, like Paula Abdul says, opposites attract. So if you're a priest, then I'm Satan, and maybe I could MC Scat Cat all over you.
Is that what you thought?
I didn't really. I was so disengaged at this point. I was just like, it's just the dude trying to bang Depardieu, and but it's for Satan, he wasn't really that evil. He showed him a shortcut, and he kissed him on the mouth. And then when Depardieu didn't want to do it, he was like, all right, we're not going to do it.
Right. That is true. I mean, I think it's more about the internal struggle of that character, maybe.
The whole thing was the internal struggle of the Depardieu character and the internal struggle of the viewer to get through the film, Josh.
That's an important thematic element of this movie.
Which is what Pialat was going for, was how do I make my audience miserable?
That's probably not inaccurate. I think that's kind of what the aim of this here is. Not that he wants people to dislike having seen the film, but I think he probably does want to evoke these feelings of despair that the character himself is feeling and get the audience to feel that.
What did you enjoy about the movie?
Not a lot, really. The countryside does look nice. I agree.
Yeah,
but
you would eat some cheese with me in the French countryside.
Yeah, I like cheese.
Yeah, that's right.
And I like Satan. So there was that. No, I don't know. I mean, I think, like you said, both of these main actors are good actors. We've talked about Gerard Depardieu before in The Last Metro, which he was very good in. And I just didn't even really engage with their performances. I mean, he is so subdued. And it was interesting watching this right after Lulu, where he gives a very big performance and he plays this character who's like kind of a criminal, and he's very passionate, and he's always lusting after women.
I mean, that's what he's at his best, right? Like, if you go through his career, he's a big performer a lot of the times, and that's what made him so successful, is he's so good at that.
Right. And maybe this was an instance of him wanting to try something different or play against type or whatever, but he's really so far back. And I think you have to get a sense of this character's internal struggle, right? His crisis of faith when he's confronted with Satan and has to face the idea that maybe Satan has won, right? I mean, that's kind of the big thing there toward the end, that he says, Satan has us in his hold. It's not God. God has been vanquished and Satan has taken control. And that's a big deal, one would think, especially if you're a priest, and it just doesn't really come across.
Yeah. The movie's not called Under the Son of God.
No, it is not.
But I mean, I keep going back to First Reform because all of these themes are laid out so clearly. And I think we see a much more engaging and kind of fully fleshed out performance from Ethan Hawke, and of course the writing. And maybe something was lost in translation, even though we had subtitles watching this, so I don't know how much could have been, but I just think that's such a better piece dealing with so many similar elements.
Right. No, I agree with you on that. And I wonder, it could be, subtitles don't necessarily always, someone has to do the translating and they're not always great. And there were a lot of dialogue scenes here where they're talking about these theological concepts. And I'm like, they're just saying a bunch of words that don't seem to really mean anything. And I do wonder if maybe there's a clearer way for that to be expressed in a translation. I don't know.
Right. And I just felt like they kept making the same points over and over again. It was one long conversation that, do you ever get on the phone with someone, Josh, or have a conversation with someone, and then you're like, or maybe your friend's talking to someone and like there is a clear end point of the conversation. You're like, oh, this conversation's over. And then the other person just keeps talking and you're like, what is going on? This conversation ended like 6 sentences ago. Why are you continuing to say this? Like, I know people who do that, and this is what that movie felt like to me.
Yeah, I can see that. It did. There's a sort of a progression of a plot, right? Gerard Depardieu is having this crisis of faith, and he's going to be sent away to another parish. He goes on this sort of journey,
a
walkabout through the countryside. He meets Satan, and then he just goes back. I guess these are the things that were sort of unclear, but he ends up back with his mentor / boss or whatever, who is played by Maurice Pialat himself. And meanwhile, Mouchette is talking to her various older lovers. She's 16 and she's been having affairs with these two older men. And then she kills one of them. And
accidentally?
Kind of, but then she seems into it. Like it.
Oh,
seems
she's
like
definitely down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
she does it by accident. And then she's like, you know what? I'm glad I did that.
I mean, there was 2 shocking moments in this movie. That was one of them. And then the other one is towards the end, this family summons for Donnisson, which is Depardieu's character. And they all think he's like special and he's got these kind of supernatural powers. And they said their son has come down with meningitis and they need him to save him. And they get there and he's dead. And Depardieu like walks away and he's like, well, I think I could help him, but what's the point? And then he's like, no, you got to help him. So they go back in and he holds the kid over his head and he gives another speech about religion. And then the kid opens his eyes. And that's the other big shocking moment of the piece.
Right. Because I think up to that point, like you were saying about the Satan character, you could say, oh, that's not really Satan. That's just some like weird, crazy guy he met on the road or whatever. Right. And he doesn't necessarily really speak to God. He himself is just kind of losing it or whatever. But he goes in that room and the kid is dead. And he takes the kid and holds him up above his head. And the kid like literally comes back to life. At that point, you have to acknowledge that, okay, there's some supernatural thing going on.
And I'm thinking of another movie we covered, Sound of My Voice, which was your pick. And then we kind of have these kind of murky layers of like, is she or isn't she, right? And then at the end, they have this great moment where it's like, wait, is she? And I think that we needed a little more of that because after this happens, it just goes back to what it was yet again.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I picked that movie in that season, which I love that movie. And all that, the idea of all that, I find really fascinating. Movies like this where it's like, something supernatural may be happening, or perhaps the character is just losing their mind and it's mysterious and ambiguous. I usually find that really fascinating. And I did not here find it fascinating. Again, I found it more confusing because of the way that things are so disjointed just in the basic progression of events and how much time has passed, for example. I mean, at one point late in the film, after Denisson comes back from his walkabout and his boss is like, okay, you're done. You're going to go hang out with these monks for a while and then we'll see. And then it cuts to some time later and he's not with the monks. He's just like a priest in a new parish. And I thought, okay, so did he go like do his penance with the monks and now he's this? How much time has passed? It was very confusing.
And you keep bringing up like these time passages and, I didn't read it as that. I just thought it was like, okay, this is the next thing and this is the next thing. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but it wasn't clear to me that there were these long time passages at all.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing is that it wasn't clear. Did time pass or did it not? Did time pass and that thing happened off screen? Or did time not pass and they didn't do that thing? I don't know. And I feel like these things were important. They spent like a whole scene talking about it and then they just didn't do it.
And you brought these monks up who Denisson brings up at the beginning. And then his boss is like, no, that's too easy. Everyone wants to go hang out with the monks. Right? Like,
Right.
What a prize. Everyone wants to just chill with these monks. And then he's like, all right. And then the boss's boss is like, no, you're going to the monks. And it would have been interesting to see these monks at some point, especially since we're dealing with so many themes of isolation and questioning the major points of life. Like, what is it about these monks that is so attractive or so necessary to these characters to get to that point or not get to that point?
Right. I was curious to see that as well. And then we don't. And he's just with this other parish and the people seem to really love him and, cherish his advice or whatever. And that's when he gets called away to go deal with the sick boy. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things like that I feel like were set up and then were anticlimactic. I mean, including the idea of him and Mouchette kind of confronting each other, right? Because we have all this buildup with her 2 lovers and she kills the guy and she talks to the other lover who says, no one's going to arrest you for this because it was ruled a suicide and all this stuff. And then finally they meet on the road. And there's another supernatural moment where Denisson is like, I know what you've done. And, you know, you need to repent or whatever. And I thought it was going to be this kind of climactic, you know, not battle per se, but like an exchange for her soul or whatever. And then she just goes home and kills herself.
Right. And Denisson doesn't do anything to bring her back. But again, that's a confusing scene because it's like the mom is there and then like they're at the kind of foot, the foot of the church. I'm like, did she kill herself at her home? Do they live in a church? What is happening here? Right. Like, it's not very clear. I think
Denisson like carried her body to the church.
And then again, you go back to that point of the editing where we see like no progression of that, and like even an exterior shot or something. Like there was nothing that made it clear. Also, the idea of like a priest who has some type of empathic powers, who can look into your soul and be like, hey, I know what you've done. This is what you got to do. Like, that's kind of a cool character, right? It could be in this like more dark supernatural type thing, or you could see like USA put on like Tony Shalhoub as like this priest, right? Like who's helping people come to terms with whatever they need to come to terms with. But
he is also a monk.
Hey. Bravo. But none of that. This again is just so many loose ends, and that's okay. Like in some places where we're leaving things open to interpretation, but here just none of it adds up to anything, I feel like.
Right. Like I said, the idea of it being ambiguous or whatever, I generally like, and you having to kind of parse it yourself. But I think you need some basic narrative coherence in order to, you know, you need to have understood the events so that you can then interpret them. And I feel like that just doesn't happen here. So, but Dave, I think you kind of liked it.
I was mixed on it as well. I agree with you guys on a lot of like the confusing aspects of it. I was wondering though what you guys thought, you know, as obviously this wasn't that long ago, 1987, but like just the idea of a priest grappling with all of this. Like, I wonder if it was a little bigger of, you know, an original idea at the time. And like, I was thinking of another movie we covered, Ordinary People, where we talked about how like, oh, therapy, like, you know, how crazy. And like, I wonder if like this was more of a heavy, unique thing at the time.
Well, you got to remember it's based on a book from 1926. So
sure.
It goes all the way back to there. I mean,
yeah. Right. And those Bresson movies that were adapted from other Bernanos books are from like the 50s and 60s, I think.
Yeah.
So what we're saying, Dave, is you're totally wrong.
Right.
I think I am. I'm chopping all my stars off this thing.
Recurring theme throughout literature. Also, I'll tell you what, Josh, and this is maybe the most insightful point I'll make today.
Okay.
Twice in the movie, once with Denisson and once with Mouchette, they come home or to wherever, or it's early in the morning and they have to leave. And they say they haven't had breakfast. And the counterpart in this scene says, "You must be hungry. Let me make you some coffee." Coffee, as I'm drinking right now, is fine, but it never fills you up. That's not breakfast. And I don't know
keto
why
it
you
does.
would say that.
On keto it does.
So you're saying
that's this the secret theme of this film is keto.
Yeah. So maybe the themes of the movie, Dave, weren't new, but maybe this keto diet, this was proto keto. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, this is an intermittent fasting breakthrough. This movie. Absolutely.
I mean, I intermittently fast at this point in time, but if I wake up, I need to eat. You know, if I wake up in the morning, which I often do, Josh, sometimes in the afternoon.
I mean, I will say that could be an instance where the translation isn't capturing the literal words that they're saying. I speak French a little, and sometimes I can catch stuff like that. I didn't notice that in that scene. I do think in one of those, the housekeeper says, you need to put something in your stomach, which if you take that literally could include coffee. But usually that means you need to eat. So you're right on that. Croissant. That's our insight about a French movie.
Omelette. Salad.
Salad.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. I think we've really gone through this. So do we want to rate this out of 5? What is the thing that he whips himself with?
Oh, I mean, that's called self-flagellation, but I don't know what the thing is.
The thingy.
What is that called? We should look it up.
I don't. I know the hair shirt, which is the garment that he wears that like is abrasive on your skin, but I'm not sure what the thing is called that he whips himself with.
Yeah.
I've seen it in other.
By the way, watching this film was akin to self-flagellation.
That's a quote. That's something. Put that on the poster, right? The César-nominated poster.
So, all right. Out of 5 self-flagellating items,
sure,
I gave it 2, and that's only because if I give it less than 2, I'm really digging to the doldrums of stuff that we've covered, and it's a little better than that, but not much.
Yeah, I wanted to like it more, but I'm going to also give it 2 out of 5. I mean, I appreciate the ambition of something like this, but to me, it just doesn't, it falls short. So, Dave, how would you rate it?
I went with 3 on Letterboxd. I think I'm dropping it at 1/2, though. 2.5. I'll still go higher than you guys because it's not like I hated it, but it is pretty damn boring.
Yeah, it really is. So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Under the Son of Satan. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1987, we have been talking about Cannes Film Festival Palme d'Or winner Under the Son of Satan from director Maurice Pialat. And as we said, he was a major French director. I feel like maybe unlike a lot of the new wave figures that we've talked about, he didn't get to be quite as well known in the US. And I don't know if he counts as part of the French New Wave, but he did start making films around that same time. And I think has been acknowledged as like a major voice in French film. But after this movie, he made only 2 more films. Van Gogh in 1991, a biopic, of course, about Vincent van Gogh. And his final film in 1995, Le Garçon, which did also star Gerard Depardieu. And he died in 2003. And Jason is not going to watch any more of his films.
Probably not. But I mean, Lulu would have been probably the one that I would have picked. He did make he made his first movie in 1969, The Naked Childhood. You want to pronounce that? Les Enfants Nus. Is that it?
No, that's not bad, actually.
And he was 43 when he made his first movie. So that's pretty cool. And produced by Truffaut, which was also pretty cool, I think. And a lot of the, Josh, and please go into detail, he often deals with the petit bourgeois. Why don't you tell us about the petit bourgeois?
Well, that's, I think, the characters. That's not this film, certainly. But I think that's the characters in Lulu, who are these kind of upper middle class people filled with ennui. And I mean, the plot of that film basically is Isabelle Huppert is married to this guy who's kind of an asshole. And then she goes to a nightclub and she meets Gerard Depardieu, who's also kind of an asshole. And she's like, I'm going to leave my husband and go with you instead. And then they have a lot of sex and yell at each other a lot. And I mean, that's pretty much the film.
You did not define the petit bourgeois at all. So it's like an artisan class. They have comfort, but they're not rich and they don't seem to have any mobility, you know. So I wouldn't even call them upper middle class, just kind of middle class people who deal with the middle class issues.
Right. I mean, I think in that movie, she's meant to be more upper middle class. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. They just kind of don't have anything. They've got a lot of ennui. They've got a lot of dissatisfaction and there's nowhere for them to go. And that's part of, you know, the allure is that she goes with the Gerard Depardieu character, Lulu, who is not upper middle class. He's kind of a petty criminal and he's volatile and he's sometimes violent, but there's that bad boy allure to him. He wears a leather jacket in this film.
Yeah.
He's got kind of shaggy hair.
That's how you know he's got an edge to him, Josh.
Right, exactly. Right. So I think that's what's going on in there. But it is very Cassavetes-ish in that it's a lot of the characters kind of yelling their feelings is the way I felt it was.
Yeah. Cool. Good. I don't think I'm going to catch it anytime soon.
No, I don't think you would enjoy it. I think you would enjoy it more than Under the Son of Satan, but probably not enough to actually want to watch it.
Well, I gave this 2 stars, Josh. So I think I'd enjoy many things more than Under the Son of Satan. We mentioned Depardieu, of course, in our last Metro episode. Still working, second highest grossing film star in French cinema history, 17 César nods and 2 wins, including for the last Metro. And he's doing some voice work, some movie work, you know, just still making making films. And that's what we're going to talk about because we're focusing on him as a professional.
Yeah, I mean, he's not making films in the US anymore. I mean, he did have a period of English language films, including before this, the most recent Gerard Depardieu performance I had seen was in 102 Dalmatians that I had to watch for an article.
I mean, Green Card, he got a the Peter Weir movie, Golden Globe nod for best actor in a musical or comedy.
Yeah, I mean, and that was like 30 years ago or whatever. I think the thing you're alluding to, the allegations against him, keep him working in Europe. But he is definitely still working, as you said.
And Josh, we cannot talk about Gerard Depardieu without bringing up My Father, the Hero. Oh, no!
Have you actually seen that movie?
Yeah, of course, when I was a kid.
Oh, okay. I have not. It's a remake. He starred in both the French language version and the English language version.
And that shows the range he's got right there.
He sure does.
But that's a classic, right? You remember that commercial where he's like water skiing and it looks like he's going to hit a buoy or something, some type of seafaring object, and he just yells, "Oh no!"
I do remember that commercial. I never saw either version of the film, but
oh no!
Apparently it made a strong impression. I hope you did that in the last Metro episode too. I don't recall.
I probably did.
Yeah.
I probably did. What else? I mean, that's what you say about him. Sandrine Bonnaire, also big time actor in France, director and screenwriter, 40 movies or more. She won the César for most promising actress for À nos amours in 1983.
Which is a Maurice Pialat film.
There you go. And for best actress for Vagabond in 1985.
Yeah, unlike Depardieu, hasn't really worked, I don't think, outside of France or not in English language films. But she was recently in the French film Happening, which got a lot of international attention. It's a very harrowing abortion drama that I did see. And,
from about the 60s, right?
Yeah, set during the 60s. So, that's something that kind of reached a more international audience.
If I'm not mistaken, she maybe directed a documentary about Marianne Faithfull. I feel like that would be something I'd like to see.
Yeah, that does sound like something you'd like to see.
Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome. I thought it was interesting. Yann Dedet, who is the editor of this film and also plays one of Mouchette's lovers. I thought that was kind of a weird, double role for him. And he's been a very successful editor and doesn't work as much as an actor. But I just thought that was kind of surprising that, not a common, double position for people in films.
Yeah, so he won his César for Police in 2011 with Laurent Gardet as his co-editor, and he edited a lot for Truffaut. But you're right, Josh. A lot of these actors, like Pialat, obviously, and the horse dealer Jean-Christophe Bouvet is another. A lot of these kind of like they're actors, they're directors, they're writers, they're like multitaskers in the film industry.
Right. And I think the performances here are not, they're not the kind of thing where you're like, oh, that's not an actor. That's Pialat's friend. And Pialat himself is perfectly solid as the senior priest.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job, but they're just, again, they're all like playing the same note over and over again, which is fine if you're Philip Glass because he gets it done, but not here for this film.
No, maybe Philip Glass could have been cast in this as well.
I'd like that.
Yeah. We talked about Paul Schrader. I think you can definitely see influence of this film and Pialat in general on his work. I also thought about Abel Ferrara, who has made some of these weird abstract dramas about religious crises. Mary, which I recall seeing at the Cinevegas Film Festival, and a recent film he made with Willem Dafoe called Siberia, which are just as tedious to watch as this movie, really. But definitely, I think, an influence on him.
The takeaway is to watch more Paul Schrader movies, I think.
Yeah, some of those Schrader movies to me are also kind of a little too much, but there are a lot of good Schrader movies, and certainly I think we can agree that First Reformed is very good.
Right, and it's interesting that we're bringing him up because we're talking about him as a writer-director, but even if you go back to like Taxi Driver and the stuff he was writing in the 70s, a lot of those themes are there in one way or another.
Yeah, and I think that too. I would imagine that Pialat influences him going all the way back to that film. Not this, of course, from then, but earlier Pialat films. I think it's probably likely that they influenced him. Anything else you want to say about the legacy of this film, Jason?
Oh, brother.
Jason's just going to do some old-timey vaudeville sound effects as his reactions to this film.
I think that covers it, Josh.
I think so. So that is Under the Son of Satan. And that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Join our religious crisis online and on social media.
Yeah, Josh, I'm at Jason Harris Comedy or J Harris Comedy on all the socials. Eat This Comedy, that's a website. Go for Jason on Letterboxd. The crisis is, why aren't more of you following? I'll follow back. I like learning about what you guys think about movies too. We're at Awesome Movie Year or Awesome Movie Year on Facebook or on Instagram at Awesome Movie Year. But if you don't want to go to Awesome Movie Year, you can go to Awesome Movie Pod on X/Twitter or /whatever. Who cares? And then awesomemovieyear.com. Josh, that's
all those things. You can find some old things from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I am at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on X Twitter and at Signal Bleed on Letterboxd. And you can listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and check me out on Letterboxd by David Rosen.
Jason, what are we talking about in our next episode?
Josh, it's our documentary pick, the heralded film known as Sherman's March.
I am very excited to talk about that. So tune in next time for Sherman's March. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.